So thank you so much for taking the time. It's a real pleasure to have the opportunity to have this discussion with you for 1.5 hours, and for you to take the time and to give us your insight and expertise is a great pleasure. I'd like to welcome you as the director of the Rule of Law Program, Middle East and North Africa. I'm sure you've heard about the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, so I won't delve into kind of who we are and what we do. If you have questions throughout the 1.5 hours, I'm sure we can get into them. But because we only have 1.5 hours, I'd like to, take the time or to give you the time and not take much of the time myself. I'd just like to quickly also thank Valeska from my office and Fadi Hachem, who we've been working closely with. At the end of the day, we want to have a brilliant publication out of this, and we're really looking forward to that. And we're looking forward to have your expertise included in it. So Fadi, thank you for the idea and for kind of being the origin of this. And Valeska, thank you so much for all your work and for also moderating the panel. It's a pleasure for me to see familiar faces. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know, and I'm really happy to get to know you now. So ahlan wa sahlan, a warm welcome from my side. And let me hand over to Valeska again to give us sort of an introduction to what we're trying to do today. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Yes, I just want to re-emphasize what Philip just said. I think we're super thrilled to have you all on board today, and we have a great set of expertise. So I don't want to take too much time because we don't have a lot of it. I just want to quickly introduce the agenda and our expert panel. So today we're taking a closer look at the Arab system of human rights, a system that we as a Rule of Law program, I think, haven't looked into enough, because we usually tend to look at individual rights more. And it's my sense that constitutions in the region have provided a maybe stronger mechanism or framework for basic rights, and that the overarching system of Arab human rights is kind of in the shadow of those. So we will look at some of the key aspects today, as well as our other regional human rights systems. And with this roundtable and the publication that Fadi is working on for us, my hope is that we can not only bring forward the conversation about the Arab system in the region, but also make it a bit more accessible for a wider audience outside of the Arab world. Fadi will be moderating our conversation today, and we will start with Dr. Maya Mansour, who will tell us about the Arab human rights system strengths and weaknesses. Dr. Mansour is an attorney at law and a human rights expert and human rights advocate based in Beirut. We will then go over to Professor Thomas Kourteris, who will look into more of technical aspects of human rights regional systems within international law. Professor Kourteris is a Greek-Dutch international law expert who currently serves as an associate professor and chair of the Department of Law at the American University of Cairo. Professor Al-Midani will then look at the Arab system standards and mechanisms and compare it to the EU human rights system. Professor Al-Midani is a distinguished figure in the field of human rights. He's a professor of human rights at Strasbourg University and serves as the president of the Arab Center for International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights Education in Strasbourg. We then will move over to Dr. Ziad Ayari, who will tell us more about the African human rights system and what lessons we might be able to learn from it. Dr. Ayari is an international law expert, and until recently, he served as Senior Research Fellow at the Max Planck Foundation for International Peace and Rule of Law in Heidelberg. And last, but surely not least, we will move over to Dr. Eli Abu Aoun, who will discuss the role of politics in the Arab human rights context. Dr. Abu Aoun is an expert in peace and conflict studies, humanitarian aid, human rights, and he's currently serving as the senior advisor for MENA Affairs at Strategy International. And I think he's still based in Tunisia. So yeah, I hope I got everything right. And I'm sorry I didn't go into too much detail about everyone's experience, but I just want to get to the core of our roundtable today. And just regarding the agenda, I just want to add that after each presentation, we will have a short round of questions that will be guided by Fadi. But I would be very grateful if we could keep the presentations not too long so that we have we can have a round of Q&A at the end of the roundtable. Thanks again so much for everyone to be here today, and I will open the floor to Fadi. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello, Philip and Valeska. Thank you for the introduction. And as Valeska said, this is going to be a more or less facilitated leaded conversation, but we really wish that every speaker would it's more of a discussion, it's less of a presentation. So we really want to, what we're trying to do here is more launching a discussion and having a discussion among us, among the different topics that we wish to cover, but feel free to chime in and ask questions and complement each other or discuss the topics that we hope to have with us today. So I leave the floor to, before leaving the floor to Dr. Maya, I have prepared a short presentation that I wish to start with, which is a very brief presentation for on the human rights system and things that we must somehow look into. Yeah, so can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so the Arab League core human rights, the human rights system as we know it is a system, what we're discussing today is the system as we know it, is the system under the Arab League. So it's very, very important that we acknowledge that the Arab League core human rights treaties are the Arab Charter on Human Rights. I'm just going to cite them briefly. So it's the Charter of 2004. It entered to force into 2008. It had a predecessor before, which is the 1994 charter that never entered into force for lack of ratification. It was drafted in participation of experts and civil society organizations in the region, and it covers mostly a lot of the rights, talking about. But there are also ones that are missing, such as anti-discrimination clause, a broad one, a freedom to manifest religion, redress, compensation of and rehabilitation for victims of torture and cruel treatment. It doesn't provide a clear right to public life, and there are no derogation possible for a large number of rights, which makes it a bit hard in terms of application of these rights on the ground. So the second treaty that we're going to talk about is that we're not going to talk about it. We're presenting is the Charter of on the Rights of the Arab Child. Briefly, this is considered a very good document. However, there's a bit of a problem with that document is that it is concerning the Arab child. So every other child that is not Arab is not covered by this treaty. So children of Amazigh or Kurdish people that live in the region are not included in this treaty. It lays out the main rights for the Arab child, including the right to be raised by a family, the right to identity and nationality, the right for education, healthcare, social security, and other rights. It is a treaty that is very much focused on the rights of the family and the rights among the family, and sends out the strong spirit of family that is also one that is very present in much in the Arab system, as you all know. Sorry for the third one here is the title is wrong. So it's other relevant Arab League treaties. And the other relevant Arab League treaties that we should mention are the Arab Convention on the Arab Status of Refugees, on the status of refugees in the Arab countries, which was set in 1994 and did not enter into force till now. A very important document is the 1965 Casablanca Protocol, is the right to guarantee Palestinians the right to live in countries, the right to get residency in the Arab countries, and the right to work, etc. Saudi Arabia, Morocco, Tunisia have not ratified the protocol, and which makes it that in practice, Palestinians living in Arab states are largely restricted by national laws. And the last document is the Arab Convention on the Suppression of Terrorism, which is adopted in 1998. Regarding monitoring and enforcement mechanisms, I'm going to go over those quickly because I'm sure you are aware of them. So there's the Arab Human Rights Committee, which is established by the Charter. It has 7 members elected for 4 years for a maximum of 2 terms. It discusses state reports and issues concluding observations on the reports submitted by states. It does not have the authority to receive individual complaints. And the downfall of this committee is that initially, as written in its statute, the experts participating in that committee should be independent experts, but they are most of the times people that have governmental positions, which mean they are ambassadors, they are councils, or they are ministers, which makes them biased first, and which makes them some of the time not really experts on the matter. With the Arab Court of Human Rights, which was established in 2014, it has 7 judges. It is based in Bahrain, which has been criticized a lot, and I'm sure Dr. Maya will go into that as we discussed that yesterday. Access is for parties and for accredited NGOs, which is a very restricted access that the court has to build on cases on the court or attend its court sessions, and its decisions are not binding, but which is also very similar in terms of courts and international law. And finally, we have the Permanent Committee on Human Rights. It's also translated as the Arab Human Rights Commission. It is the main political human rights body of the Arab system of human rights. Each state sends 1 representative to participate and take part in that commission, and it has an advisory and a regulatory role, which is also something very common in terms of systems. This is not under the Arab system of human rights per se, but it's a very annex system that lives and coexists with the Arab system that we should be very much, some say, however, in different papers, some say that this system is more effective today than the Arab system of human rights, but it's not inclusive of all Arab countries, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. The OIC has core human rights instruments, which is the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights on Islam, the 1990, and the Covenant of the Rights of the Child in Islam in 2005. And it has a monitoring and enforcement mechanism, which is the Independent Permanent Human Rights Commission of 2011. This was a very brief presentation. Thank you and I hope that we can, this is something that we can use to launch the conversation. I'm going to leave the floor to Dr. Maya to do her first intervention. I'm not going to say presentation because it's not really a presentation here we're doing. So leaving the first intervention to Dr. Maya.
Thank you, Fadi. Morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. We can't see you, though. I don't know if your video's on or...
Yeah, I don't think that I have put the video on, but at least you can hear me, right?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cass and Fadi, for this initiative. I'm very happy that finally the Arab system is back on the table. It has been really a while that I didn't hear on the topic, and it's somehow ignored or neglected, which it's an important topic that we should keep on pushing for and promoting in our part of the world. So as Fadi mentioned, I will be basically tackling the general aspect of the Arab Charter for Human Rights and the Arab Charter and the Arab Court for Human Rights from a positive and a negative angle. Since I'm on this panel with experts in the field, I will try to be very brief, and we'll open up later on for any kind of discussions. So first of all, definitely, when it comes to the Arab Charter for Human Rights, whether in the first or in the second version of 94 and 2004, we noticed that despite that the international norms exist in both charter, and that it reaffirms in its preamble the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the two international covenants on civil and political rights and on economic, social, and cultural rights, but still international human rights standards are not protected. And it has a weak protection, mainly when it comes to the rights of women, children, and minorities. And one of the main weakness, it gives the local legislation the upper hand compared to other provisions. As examples, I can mention death penalty, for example. So death sentence to minors under 18 still exists, especially when the local legislation permits it. And we have also other weaknesses when it comes to children and women. Another weaknesses, it condemns Zionism as a form of racism that violates human rights. And we notice as a general observation as well that the Arab Charter of Human Rights, it prioritizes Islam over other religions. And it puts the Sharia as the main legal instrument, if you want to put it this way. And it makes also reference to the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights. Do you hear me? Just give me a sign because I have the impression that I'm speaking alone.
No, we can hear you.
Okay. So again, within the weaknesses, it's the mechanism itself. It lacks an effective mechanism of accountability and enforcement. The court, it does not allow for individual complaint mechanism, which it defeats the purpose of a regional human rights court. So individual, they cannot submit complaints. It has to be through the states. And obviously, such system is not able to address the weaknesses of the current regimes in the Arab states to protect human rights in the region. So definitely, we have a lack of transparency when it comes to the court, lack of guarantee that the court and the judges will have sufficient independence. When it comes to monitoring for the execution of the courts, again, there is a lack of transparency and independence. There is also an important weakness, if we can say, it's the location of the court. The choice of Bahrain, I'm not sure if today Bahrain is the most country to respect human rights in the Arab world, especially that there is a big influence of the ruling family. And even it dominates a highly politicized justice system. So we have noticed in the past years that there is a lot of human rights violations and political influence. So this is among, let's say, the question mark on the location of the court. And one last remark, it's basically on the political will. If today we want to have or to make this court functional, we need definitely to have a political will of the Arab states to improve the situation of human rights in the region. And I think Dr. Abu will discuss this topic in details about the political will of the countries. So in general, these are some of the weaknesses of the Arab Charter and the Arab courts. Of course, there is many others, but these are the main ones. But still, despite the negative points, we still have some positive aspects that we can tackle. So despite the lacking of a mechanism for direct individual petition, the court should be considered as an important step in the process of establishing an effective system to protect and promote human rights. In the preamble, it has acknowledged, in the Arab Charter, the preamble, it has acknowledged that human rights are universal and interrelated, and have put human rights at the center of the key national concerns of Arab states. This is something that we can base on to promote human rights principles in the future. And moreover, it fosters regional cooperation and dialogue among Arab countries on human rights issues. This is in theory, because in practice, it's not being implemented properly. And another positive aspect, it's basically, so despite all the negativity or the lack of international standards in place, there is something that we can work on. It's basically the amendment of Article 52. Article 52 of the Arab Charter, it allows amendment to the Charter and to propose additional optional annexes. So therefore, the doors are not closed for introducing specific or additional mechanism through such protocols. So I think the door is open for some improvement to put in place. But again, all of this, it depends on a proper political will in the region. So this is in general some aspects of the Arab Charter and the Arab Court for Human Rights.
Thank you, Dr. Maya. I will then, before launching a discussion there, this is very insightful and very important for the talks we'll have at the end. So we've discussed the strengths and the weaknesses, and I will pass over to Dr. Professor Thomas Kuteris, who will be discussing some assumptions that we have on human rights and how these assumptions are reflected in that system, if any. So, Professor Thomas.
Thank you very much, Fadi, and thank you to the Stiftung for the invitation. And I'm truly pleased to come to know our distinguished colleagues on the panel. I've been in the Arab world for 15 years, but I have never been implicated before in specific discussions regarding the Charter and the system of human rights. So it's a great pleasure for me to learn and hear from you. And I'll try to do my best to contribute positively to the discussion. Excuse me. So when I approach topics like this, I like to start from the basics and maybe questions that are far too basic. So the first is the following. We have assumptions that regionalism in human rights can work positively for the protection of rights, because one can get the best of both worlds, right? So on the one hand, you can have the capitalize on the progress made on the universal level, and then you can have a regional approach that accommodates the specificities and the cultural predicates of a particular region, on the assumption that this affinity with a culture is going to encourage adherence to the principles. It will make them sound less Eurocentric, and therefore foster, belief in the system, etc. So the first question I think to be asked is whether this approach has paid off, or whether it was just simply a copycat of the successful, possibly European and Latin American examples. So I'm putting this forward as a question, and I'll explain why I'm not attempting to answer it in a second, because the idea of getting the best of both worlds is fine, but getting the worst of both worlds is also not desirable. But let me move to the second point that I want to make, which might make a little clearer why I'm not actually providing an answer as to why it has paid off. The second point I want to make refers to the basis of obligation. And as a jurist and as a theorist of law, I don't want to put too much attention on this, but it is actually to some extent important, as our colleagues in the European and Latin American system will attest to. When you put a dog and a cat in a box and you close the lid, you can hope that they will become friends and they will learn to speak each other's language, or it may turn out that they end up disparaging each other. And the problem here is that on the one hand, we have universal human rights, so everybody accepts their universality, etc. But then we have a commitment to other principles, which for many people are incompatible with the universality of human rights. Now, the Arab Charter has adopted an approach which could be described as creative ambiguity in this regard, because on the one hand, yes, it invokes Sharia as the basis of obligation, but on the other hand, it pays lip service to the universality of the human rights. And there's a very, very good doctrinal question to be asked. What is left of the core of the right when you apply the original filter on it? Now, I don't have a problem with that, in as much as I do not believe that human rights are capable of attaining a universality on the level advertised by the promoters of human rights. So I do not think that there is a core value in human rights beyond the discourse of human rights that can be truly universal. So we have a universal vocabulary of human rights, but the actual application of human rights is nothing but universal. So when it comes to the second point, the basis of obligation is, how do we wish to resolve this conflict? I mean, we cannot have the pie and eat it at the same time. We cannot promote universal human rights, but allow for the specificity of any regional logic to human rights at the same time, without being quite precise and honest about what is it that we want to achieve in this regard. Now, I see a degree of intellectual dishonesty, which is understood easily in the context of political discourse, and it's understood very well in the effort to promote and disseminate. At the same time, if I were a judge in the Arab Court of Human Rights, I would need to think very carefully as to how I want to draw the line in the sand, and what is left of the customary law of human rights that we proclaim that exists, as opposed to the original approaches. Now, the third point that I want to make refers to the idea of robustness that we saw in the blurb of the event today. What is a robust system of human rights? I don't know. And I don't know because there are many different ways of robustness, of assessing robustness and efficiency. And I am not sure that we agree on what are the benchmarks of robustness that we want to have achieved in the region. So unless, again, there is an honesty in agreeing on the level of robustness that we want, and what does it really mean? And of course, there's a whole technology about that, right? So I'm not suggesting that I don't know what it means because I haven't seen it before. There's a whole shopping list, of measures that one can take to increase robustness, etc. But when it comes to targets that need to be met and benchmarks, I haven't seen the precision required, and there is no such precision because of lack of political consensus on the matter. But if there is no political consensus, then to go back to the first point that I made, what are the dividends of regionalism? Which assumes political consensus on a level not possible on the universal level. And finally, how can we assess robustness, and that's my fourth point, without evidence and data? You know, we can talk until we're blue in the face about whether human rights work in the Arab world or not, but how do we measure that? I mean, the move from the specific to the general, you know, like talking to my colleagues who work in human rights organizations here in Egypt and hearing about cases is very important to me, because I understand what's happening in Egyptian courts. But this doesn't speak about the state of the union. You know, you cannot be projected even on a national level, let alone on a regional level, without metrics. So what are the metrics, and how can we speak about the efficiency or non-efficiency, robustness or non-robustness of the system? Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that the level of protection of human rights in the Arab world is satisfactory, but anything but that. But this is my personal opinion, and I cannot possibly write a paper supporting this assertion because I do not have the evidence to do so. So again, some work needs to be done in providing transnational ways of collecting information and deciding again what is the type of data that need to be collected so that we can have half reliable, at least, ideas of what's going on. I'll stop here because I understand that I mean, my purpose was to simply put forward these concerns and take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Thomas. Very insightful intervention. I will now leave the floor to Dr. Ziad Ayari. Dr. Ziad Ayari will be speaking about the comparative approach to the Arab human rights system with the African human rights and what lessons to learn. This is a very important intervention because two main points need to be highlighted here. Is that there are countries that are common between the Arab system and the African system. So the Northern African countries are part of both systems, which is something that rarely happens in terms of human rights systems, regional ones, because that's not the purpose of having regional systems. And another important common thing is that ironically, the Arab system of the Arab League has participated in the setting up of the African system, which was set and became active way before the Arab system of human rights. So these are just points that I wanted to raise in the beginning of this. Dr. Ayari, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fadi Hachem. I want to first thank the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for their invitation. It's a very interesting topic to discuss, and there is no too much, I would say, writing in the expertise on this Arab human rights Arab system. I want to start with a statement, I think, of a former Lebanese minister of Foreign Affairs who said one day that the Arab League has two immunities, one immunity against death and another immunity against progress. And in our topic today, the real dilemma for any human rights activist or expert in the Arab world who wants to give a realistic recommendation to the Arab state to improve the Arab human rights system is to ask himself, am I going too far or is it not enough? Shall we bet and push to have a good and efficient Arab human rights system, or push to stop the sketch and say it's better to have nothing? Or perhaps shall we accept for the moment a weak system with some perspective of development and say it's better than nothing? I don't know what is the best, but personally, I'm in favor for a slow reform process than nothing. And there is a proverb saying that a falling tree makes much more noise than a growing forest. This is why I wanted to discuss the topic, and I thank Ms. Held to adapt the program to highlight the experience of the African human rights system, which is far to be a model of success. We'll see it. However, the African system, and especially the establishment and the functioning of the African Court of Human and People's Rights created new dynamics that deserve some interest. It's a wide topic, and I wanted to highlight 4 main points that could help to design and to help the implementation in the future of the Arab human, or an efficient implementation of the Arab human rights system. First, the process of establishment of the African Court and its beginning of functioning is similar to the Arab Court. It took like too many long time to start functioning. The African Charter on Human Rights was adopted in 1981, but there is no court at this time. It was only a commission with no binding decision. The court was created or legally established only in 1998 with the called Protocol of Ouagadougou. It's protocol linked to the African Charter on Human Rights. The entry into force of the protocol took 6 years later in 2004, and the process of operationalization of the court took 2 years, and it took finally 11 years to have the first judgment in 2009 of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. The individual and NGOs, which is my second point, are entitled to present claims to African Court, but to one condition: if the state of their nationality present a declaration that accepts this possibility. And from like 55 member states of the African Union, only 12 states made today this declaration. And worst, 4 states withdraw their declaration from 12. So we have only 8 today with this possibility, so which is not a good sign. The position of the court is not ideal, and the court seems to have also there is like problem of will, and we'll see that this political will, but also a problem of judicial politics. I don't know, I have the term in French, politique judiciaire, and the court seems to not have this at all. At the beginning, the court statuted in a very sensitive case, for example, in the presidential elections in Tanzania, in the case Mchikila and other against Tanzania in 2013. The commission, the Electoral Commission, asked that the candidates shall be presented by political parties existing at least from 10 years. So this, for example, pushed independent candidates to not take part in this election, and the court decided to say that it's a clear violation of the right to political participation, and made it possible for this candidate to present. In other also cases, it was very sensitive in the court, and the decisions were implemented at the beginning. But for example, 2 years ago, the court condemned Tunisia for the process started in 2022 by the actual president, which started with an exceptional situation. I'm not defending, I'm against here this exceptional measures decided by the president, but it was sized by a lawyer who asked Mr. Ibrahim bin Mohammed bin Eid, who asked the abrogation of the presidential decrees. He alleges violation of its political right, but Mr. Ibrahim was not targeted as an individual, and the court should have reconsidered the position. And today, Tunisia has not implemented this decision, which lead to more weaknesses of the court. And the day when the Arab court will start functioning, inshallah, as we say, it shall have, I think, better understanding of its political situation. It's better to be efficient on 20% than not to be efficient on 100% at all. So I think also this is, we have to discuss. Finally, and I think this is the last point, as you said, some member states of the Arab League are also members of the African Court on Human Rights. And here also we have to see how, for example, if this court will start functioning, how this competition between these two courts will be resolved, and which court will have the priority for these at least North African states who are members to the Arab League. So this is the main points that I wanted to highlight. It's a wide topic, and I will prefer to answer question and to have it in discussion after. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ziad. Thank you for everyone's intervention are basically now asking questions, so which is good. So we have a lot of questions to discuss. We hope the time will help at the end. I now leave the floor to Professor Amin Al-Midani, which is one of the big professors in law that are specialized on this topic. So very happy to have you among us. Dr. Midani, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I little bit confused because I prepared my intervention in Arabic, and I think it will be difficult for everybody to understand what I will say in Arabic. So I will translate it in English and say some or give you some ideas about what I think now concerning the Committee on Human Rights created by the Arab Charter on Human Rights. But before that, can I have the share? I want to complete it what Mr. Fadi said about the OAC and the League of Arab States. Can I share with you the screen, please?
I think you are a host, Professor Midani, so I think...
You see now?
No, can you try again, please?
You can see there's a green button at the
yes,
bottom.
I will do it. I will do it like that. Okay. I think you can see it now.
Yes, we're
okay. Exactly. What Mr. Fadi explained to us that there are now 3 instruments adopted by the League of Arab States, Arab Charter on Human Rights, and we have also Arab Child Charter and the Convention of Refugees. But I would add also this very new one, the Arab Declaration on the elimination of all forms of violence against women and girls. It is a very important one. And now when I teach in Strasbourg University, I speak about that because it is the first declaration adopted by the League of Arab States to protect women and girls. This is the one point about the League of Arab States. The other point, I think you can see it now. No?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I complete also what Mr. Fadi said about the instrument adopted by the OAC. We have first Dhaka, Bangladesh Declaration on Human Rights in Islam in 1983. Nobody speak about it. We have also, and very known one, the Cairo, Egypt Declaration on Human Rights in Islam in 1990. We have the Declaration on the Rights of the Child and its Protection in Islam, adopted in Rabat, Morocco in 1994, and the Convention on the Right of the Child in Islam, adopted in Sana'a, Yemen in 2005. But the new one, it is the OAC Cairo Declaration on Human Rights, adopted in Niamey in Niger in 2021. That is the new one. And the problem here, for example, in Europe, when we speak about Islam and human rights, I already published a book about this question, Islam and human rights, in French, of course. Nobody speak about this new declaration. And if you have time to you can find this declaration with the website of the organization, you will see there is very big difference between this declaration and the Cairo Declaration. Personally, I didn't like the Cairo Declaration, and I share what Dr. Maya said already about the preamble of the Arab Charter concerning the mention of Cairo Declaration, because there are contradiction between the equality between men and women adopted by the Arab Charter, but there is no equality in right and duty with the Cairo Declaration. This is the point I want to mention before to say something about the Arab Committee. First of all, also about that, perhaps I will close this one. Okay. First of all, I don't know if you are heard that they will change the name of the committee created by the Arab Charter. The new name is Arab Charter Committee on Human Rights. But we need 7 ratification. There are now only three Arab state member of the League ratified this new title of the Arab Committee. We need 7 ratification, and we don't know when will change the name of the committee. What I want to explain to you, I think I wrote many articles, books, and in Arabic, French, English to speak about the committee. But what we call here in France, for example, cuisine intérieure, that means what's happened inside the committee. I will explain some events, and we will see if these events are good or not for the committee. First of all, we must know that now there are 7 members of the committee from Palestine, Algeria, Emirate Arab Union, Qatar, Sudan. Sudan is woman, former ambassador. For me, it is not normal that a former ambassador chosen as expert to be a member of the committee. And we have a lady from Lebanon. I don't know if you know it, Mrs. Rida Murad, and from Saudi Arabia. So we have 7 members now. What I want to say also that since the creation of the committee until now, all the president of the committee coming from Gulf state. Today we have president from Qatar, before it was from Saudi Arabia, and before the first one from Emirate Arab Union. That's mean we have some orientation of this committee when we choose the president of this committee. In the beginning, the first member elected in 2009, and there is no woman chosen at this time to be a member. I wrote an article, and the League of Arab States asked me to write a paper concerning the mechanism of the Arab state, and I am beginning with this question: why we don't have women as member of this committee? I think it is very important to know. Of course, the mechanism of the committee, Arab committee, it is very primitive committee created in 1966 by the International Convent of Political and Civil Rights. So we repeated the same system. Each state should send periodic reports, initial reports, and as we know all, there is no possibility to present individual or state communication to the committee. That is very huge gap in the mechanism of the Arab Charter. One last point, I have some other points I will share it with you during the discussion. And it is a very important point in my point of view. We don't have what we call preparatory work when they prepare the Arab Charter. And I asked the president of the committee of legal committee in the Arab League, where did the preparatory work of the Arab Charter? He told me about which work you speak. We don't have. And as you know now today, if we want to know the position of each European state about the European Convention, and there's very known professor died today, Professor Karl Vazat. He wrote his thesis in 1964 about the travaux préparatoires of the European Convention, to know each state, the proposition of each state voted against or with this article of European Convention. And today, if we want to know how the Arab state or expert of Arab state working and prepare this Arab Charter, we don't have anything. So everybody speak as he liked and said this state showed this position and the other one showed this position. It is very important to mention this gap also about the Arab Charter. So I have another observation, but perhaps with the end of the presentation, we can share all that together. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Midani. Last but not least, everyone has been asking one question that I think you'd be the one who can give a lot of insights on, Dr. Abu Aoun, which is everyone has spoken about the political will. Everyone has spoken about there's no political will and it's not happening for some reason. So yes, indeed, the League of Arab States is not new. It has been there for 80 years now. It's one of the oldest established system, but yet the only one with no human rights system. So I leave you the floor to elaborate more on this point and to talk about that political will that everyone has been mentioning in their interventions.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you hear me well? Great. So I'd like to thank you, Fadi, and Philip and Valeska for inviting me. This is not my first event with Konrad Adenauer, and I hope it's not going to be the last one. Yeah, I was assigned to talk about the political will, but obviously, as we all know, political does not strictly mean the regimes or the governments. We're talking about the political will in its broader definition. First of all, I'd like to highlight that there is an issue with the terminology and the definition itself. I think Maya or Fadi, I can't remember if it was Maya or Fadi, highlighted to the fact that the way Arab is defined is by itself discriminatory. There are non-Arab communities in the region who are either explicitly or implicitly excluded from all sorts of protection. So first and foremost, I think what we need to do is to make sure that any work on this issue or any upcoming legal instruments at the regional level change this paradigm about what is Arab, what is not Arab. Obviously, I don't think we are going to suggest using a completely different word. I can easily pinpoint to the example of how European is used. So European is used in a much more inclusive way. Any European legal instrument applies to everyone living in the continent. It doesn't necessarily apply to people only coming originally from European countries. So we have a good example that we can use for the region. So we don't have to change the name of the region. We're not going to come up with a new name, but we can just make the definition more inclusive. The second point I'd like to highlight is that all the legal instruments that were described and analyzed in the previous by the previous speakers did not come as a result of a social transformation. So they came just for aesthetic purposes. The governments in the region wanted to make sure that they ride the tide by saying, yes, in the region, we also have a Declaration on Human Rights. We have conventions and committees and all sorts of instruments. But, you know, we all remember that, not remember, I mean, we're not there, but we all know that in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights would not have been accepted or voted by all member states if it was not the result of, you know, all the atrocities that happened in the two world wars and the social transformation that this has triggered in Europe and in the West in general. So it is essential that we tie any work on these legal instruments with work on the social level, on the social transformation level. Because if we get to a stage where we just amend the language of these instruments, they will still remain obsolete if they're not, if there is no buy-in. Third point I'd like to highlight is, so who's going to do this, right? So I heard some of the speakers talking about governments. I don't think that a typical definition of government applies in the case of 99% of the countries in the region. So just to be politically, diplomatically safe, we have ruling regimes in the region. We don't have governments. We have rulers and ruling regimes, but we don't have governments. Because government, by definition, is an entity that is supposed to be somehow elected, if not directly, indirectly. It has to be at the service of a population, and it has to be accountable to a population. And I'm afraid that all three characteristics do not exist in our region. So we have ruling regimes, not governments. And obviously these ruling regimes, the last thing they want is to see any legal instruments trying to put restrictions or limitations on their absolute power or authority. And this is I think this is a spontaneous reflex that we can see even in Western governments. I mean, any government hates human rights instruments that would limit, or legislation that would limit their authority. So what about a ruling regime that does not consider itself as accountable in the first place? For this political will to happen, you know, I'm afraid that first of all we need to make sure that there is a bottom-up pressure from the population in one way or another. So we need to combine this political with the public will, but also we need to find ways or a middle ground or a common ground between the concept of identity-based politics and human rights. As you all know, in most of the region, there are very few exceptions, but in most of the countries in the region, we have an issue with identity-based politics. In some cases, it's working well. In other cases, it's not working at all. It led us to conflicts and violence and all of this. For the last 70 or 80 years, we've been all brainwashed with this paradigm that it's either you drop this whole thing of identity-based politics, or you cannot become a democracy, or you cannot, you know, practice democratic principles. Personally, I think that this is a wrong assumption. There are ways to reconcile identity. So there are ways to reconcile a healthy practice of identity-based politics with respect of human rights. And this is an intellectual work that very, very few people in the region have undertaken. And it's unfortunate because I see this also as happening first at the academic level, and then at the social level, and then it will reach the political level. And I think this is where we're still stagnating, is that even at the academic level, we don't have enough outputs on how we can reconcile the two concepts. Obviously, the political timing now is not ideal. I don't think that an agenda of Arab human rights instruments or improvements or amendments is timely now with all what's happening in Gaza, with the fallout of the international human rights system, as we've seen since October 7th. I don't think that the public opinion or even the the intellectual elite in the region is ready to have this discussion. So I strongly advise to have this discussion somehow postponed, or at least to do some underground preparatory work until the political timing is more ripe for this discussion to happen. And the last point I'd like to mention here, which is part also of this political will, is the posture and the demeanor of the civic actors in the region. So the civic actors in the region, whether civil society organizations, unions, academia, etc., all of this ecosystem that is not part of the ruling system, including the private sector as well, are also a reflection of the social realities that I just described. So, wherever we have a prevailing discriminatory practice, for example, we would see a lot of civil society organizations or academics embracing this discriminatory practice. So the civic actors are not excluded or are not innocent from these practices, and we need to make sure. And the second most important aspect that is missing from my perspective in the civic space is accountability. We see accountability as only submitting audit reports to the donors and narrative reports about our projects, but we don't feel that we're accountable to our constituencies. We claim that we represent communities or specific, interests or agendas, but we don't want to hold ourselves accountable to our failures towards these communities. And also within this civic actors or the civic space problematic is the fusion that we've seen in many, many countries between the civic actors and political opposition groups. We've seen political opposition groups actually working under an umbrella of human rights organizations or labor unions or otherwise, with the sole purpose of accessing power or changing the regime. So their agenda was not a real agenda for human rights or workers' rights. It was just a tool to change the regime. So this has to be dissociated. The civic space has to be dissociated from political opposition, not politics. I still, I definitely see the civic space or the civic actors as important actors in politics in general, but I'm talking about partisan politics and power struggle. And this is where we need to find the dissociation. So anyway, just to conclude, I think three main takeaways. The first one is that it's impossible to do anything without a social transformation. And obviously, when I say social transformation, it doesn't have to be sequential, because social transformation is a process. It takes a long time. What I'm saying is that it has to be parallel. It can't, we can't ignore the social transformation, but we can't wait until it's done, obviously. The second one is to have more political inclusion and diversity. And here on purpose, I'm not talking about democracy, because the definition and the practice of democracy is subject to a lot of questioning at this stage. But political inclusion, I think, is a clearer concept that we can easily, unpack in practice. And the third one is to take into account the fragility of the region, including the absence of avenues for upward social mobility. I think, and this is where the young people are really missing this link between them and their countries, that they don't see how their country provides them with avenues of social mobility. And I'll conclude with this very practical example about this. So I know of Tunisians who live in southern Tunisia, who are involved in smuggling and who make usually 900 to 1,000 euros a month, because they smuggle goods across the border. And nevertheless, these same locations, youth are leaving from these locations to Italy by boat illegally. So they're putting their lives at risk. They're getting to Italy, where income is not going to be more than 1,000 euros. But just because in Europe or in Italy, they see upward social mobility in front of them. They see avenues for upward social mobility. So it's not only about generating income and, opening, full phone repair shops and sewing workshops or whatever. It goes much more addressing fragility and the economic issue in the region goes much beyond just providing income. And if we don't fix this issue, it will be very hard to promote a human rights agenda in the region. And we've seen, after 2011, with all the political uprisings, we've seen how all of these political change basically failed because the economic and the social aspects were not taken into account. I'll stop here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you once more.
Thank you, Dr. Abu Aoun. So I think the most imminent question is that that we can start with here is, these are very, very interesting ideas. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contribution and for your expertise and inputs. But I think the first question that comes to mind here is, okay, but what now? So if we were to start with something, putting aside the fact that, of course, now I agreeing with Dr. Abu Aoun that the time now is not really the best time to do so, and nothing can be done on the table at the moment because there are more pressing issues to discuss, especially in the current situation of Palestine. But let's say working underground and hypothetically, where would we start for improvement? And I think Dr. Ziad Ayari has raised this in their interventions. So where should we start? Yes, Dr. Ayari. For the shortness of time, if we can all just make our interventions now less developed than the ones we did before. The ones we did before were time, but now for the purpose of a discussion, in the short remaining time that we have, let's everyone just leave our interventions to 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fadi. I think what's now, this is the main question. This is why I ask it, shall we go too far or is not enough full? I consider that the current situation, well resumed by Dr. Abu Aoun, the political situation, it's better to focus or to reform the Arab system on, I would say, some areas which it can be efficient. For example, no climate change, desertification. But for example, democracy, political participation today, I think we'll have an inefficient system. I think we have to rethink about cultural rights, health rights that can be a first step to have this efficient system. But if we want to have something similar to the European system or even the inter-American, it will be very difficult today to have something serious. This is my position, is to limit the system of protection in the Arab League to some areas which can be an added value for the Arab states. Also, there is the risk also to have double standards, because also they are members to the UN Convention, the Arab states. And then in their relation, you can have less rights for their citizens than, for example, the universal rights. This is also this risk. This is my main remark.
Thank you, Dr. Ayari. Dr. Midani, Professor Midani.
Yes, thank you. I think we have the solution between our hands. Here in the Arab Charter, we have Article 52. He speaks about additional optional protocols. And you, as you know, all that there are now 16 additional protocols to the European Convention, 16. That means we have the solution or the way to change a little bit the Arab Charter for the better, or the Arab system in general. I would mention concerning the Arab Court of Human Rights, Dr. Maya spoke about that there are only now one Arab state ratified the statute of this court. This is Saudi Arabia. Perhaps for you it is strange, but Saudi Arabia ratified the Statute of the Arab Court adopted in 2014. And Bahrain signed this. So if you want, I know the events today in Middle East, or especially in Gaza, it is not very easy for everybody inside the Arab world and out of the Arab world. But as I said, we have some tools to work with, additional protocols or proposition. And I think the role of the civil society, it is very important. Why did we change or ameliorate or adopted a new version of the Arab Charter in 2004? Because there were many meetings in Geneva, here in Strasbourg, in Arab state, in Yemen. I participate to propose to ameliorate the version, the first version, 1994. So I think we have the tools, but we need also the will, political will, and also the will of the civil society. This is, I think, the solution. We can start by that, and we will see later the situation change every day in the Middle East, and perhaps we need to be together if we want to do anything new. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Midani. If no one has more interventions on that same question, yes, Professor Guterres.
Thank you. Of course, it's very presumptuous of me to have anything to say about this topic and how to move forward. And I will not proclaim to do that. So I will then put forward another concern, but I think it's quite relevant. We take it for granted that the invocation of language of human rights is a good thing. Because, of course, culturally, we come from a generation that relied on human rights in order to attain its objectives. And as Dr. Aboun said earlier on, it was the political momentum of the Second World War and previous moments that generated this type of discourse. But today, the invocation of human rights discourse is suspect of a lot of things as well, such as Eurocentrism. It raises post-colonial kickback, amongst other things. And also, it is clear that the top-down approach is very difficult to proceed with at this stage. So the concern that I have is whether the automatic assumption that speaking about international human rights protection is the best way to achieve the social outcomes that we want to achieve. It could be, for example, that if you take a different approach, which is about, relating to economic empowerment, to empowerment in general, in one way or another, in sectoral issues might be a lot more efficient in attaining actually the same results, even better results, without invoking the heavy vocabulary of human rights law. At least this is what I see among many of my colleagues here in Egypt who are doing phenomenal work, but under different guises and under different headings and under different spins. So my feeling is that using the discourse of human rights more deliberately and being sure that actually it yields dividends in a particular context, in a particular situation, is another issue to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Guterres. No one has more interventions on that topic. I'm going to move on to my next question, which is something that Dr. Aboun has talked about. So I don't know if I'm sure everyone is aware that the Arab system is now opening up somehow to, at least before the Gaza events. There's a willingness somehow. There's a vision somehow set by Saudi Arabia, by the Emirates. We're talking about having a Gulf visa now. a Gulf visa that would start and expand later on to become an Arab visa later, which is kind of a vision where they would start by having something that is similar to the Schengen visa that is appropriate for European countries. There are talks about infrastructure development. And wouldn't that be, I think, I don't know if Dr. Abaon can elaborate on that. Wouldn't that be a first step towards putting on the human rights system on the table as a discussion? So unified roads, unified development, unified infrastructure, going towards a unified visa later on, doesn't help that set the way for a human rights system next?
Thank you, Fadi. Honestly, no, I don't see it this way. I don't think that this kind of you know, improvements in or regional integration would help at this stage. They might be helpful at a later stage, but at a time when, as I said, there's no social buy-in to the very basic values of human rights, I don't know how establishing a unified visa would really push this agenda further. So I think there are more priority areas that need to be addressed. At a later stage, efforts for regional integration would definitely be helpful. But not at this stage, as I said. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question, I think it would be for whoever wants chooses to answer, is that we cannot neglect the fact that we have two systems that are running in parallel. We have the OIC and we have the Arab system of human rights. And we can also not neglect that at some points there are contradictions between the Cairo Declaration and the international standards. So pushing for international standards in the Arab system of human rights, that besides the conflicts that with internal laws and with the which is the issue of universality that Professor Skuteris was talking about, but we have a big system set in place that is issuing declarations, and some of our recent, as Professor Midani has showcased, there's a parallel system that is developing and that is growing. Isn't that a bit contradictory, Professor Midani, with the Arab system of human rights?
I don't think so. Why? Because we can take the example of here in Europe. You know that we have the European system created with the Council of Europe, and now we have what we call fundamental charter of fundamental rights created by the European Union. So we have two human rights systems here in Europe, one for 46 state member of Council of Europe and one with 27 states with European Union. The example of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, it is little bit not very easy to compare with the Arab system, because with the Arab system, as you know, we have the Permanent Commission of Human Rights in Cairo, and with the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, we have also Permanent Commission in Jeddah, but it is not the same topics, not the same competence for these two commissions. And we have organization about the right of women created also by the OEC, and we have only this Commission Permanent Arab Committee with the League of Arab States. So perhaps there will be what we call concurrence between these two organizations to ameliorate little bit the situation of human rights in these countries, the member countries. I think it will be more how I said, more important to have two systems of protection, one with the League of Arab States and another with OEC. But we don't have until now what we call bridge to collaborate together. And I don't think there were any meeting between these different committees created by these two organizations. We need to ameliorate this collaboration between these two regional organizations, perhaps it will be better than to be in concurrence one avec the other.
Thank you, Professor Medani. I think the time has, we have no more time for no more questions. If anyone wishes to, yes, I'm not concluding yet, Philip. So yeah, leaving the floor for you to the conclusion. So if no one has any more interventions, I will leave the floor to Valeska and Philip to conclude this session. Thank you very much.
So I have a question. There's one question I'd really like to ask, because I mean, I have a good dozen, but how often do I have the chance to ask 5 such esteemed experts? So actually, a question that you brought up, Dr. Skuteres, is the question of data and evidence. And this whole time, of course, political will is one of the main issues we have, and we have it in all the subjects basically that I deal with every day. In regards to the rule of law, there's many difficulties. And I was thinking about how can we convince these regimes that it's beneficial to have a human rights system the way that we're discussing it. And I was thinking, of course, you need some sort of data and evidence and measurements to be able to discuss, right? And to say, you know, this is what we're looking for. There's no need to fix something that isn't broken, but in order to show that something's broken, I need to show measurements. So my question is, what are certain points of measurements that you experts think are feasible to actually collect? What is data I can collect in these countries where I won't run into a wall, right? We have the rule of law index by the World Justice Project that isn't able to receive the information it needs from many countries in the Gulf, for example, which is why in the world map they're blank, because it simply doesn't have the measurements. Very specifically, what are specific things that we could actually collect from these countries where we wouldn't run into trouble because the regimes, the governments would say, that's fine. You know, we're happy to give you that information, but at the same time, we can use it to actually kind of measure how well the Arab human rights system works.
Thank you.
So I went on part two. Yeah,
thank you very much. It's a good question. So a few years ago, no, 3 years ago, I started an effort collecting data of this sort about the practice of international law in the Arab world at large. So not just human rights, but the practice of states. And one of the types of data that is very helpful in this process is court decisions. Now, of course, as you know, court decisions are not reported in a systematic manner. So if one wanted to get a copy of a judgment, one would need to be either very lucky or to go and fetch a physical copy whenever possible in print and have it translated. So after about a year, the amount of cases that we were able to gather with a very competent team of LL.M holders, who speak Arabic and they're embedded in the system, etc., was quite disheartening. And I mean, in a way, I have abandoned the project because of that, because I was not able to collect a meaningful statistical sample. But when I was referring of ways in which it can improve the situation without waving the flag of human rights, which, it can be fashionable or unfashionable at times, is to push, for example, for the digitalization of the, of the court system. I mean, there are agendas which make a lot of sense in a number of ways for states which are keen, to improve efficiency in their public administrations, which could have additional benefits. So it would not be data pertaining to human rights, but would be a way of knowing more about how the legal system works. I was astonished that I found one court decision of an appellate court in Egypt, which said that customary law has a direct effect in the European legal order. It's just what? And it was never overturned by anyone else because it didn't happen to be overturned, right? But it's a kind of a, judicial practice that it came out of the blue. Now, what if we were able to have more information of this sort? So I ran out of funding in my project, but if CAST has money, that they don't know what to do with, we can always go back to my database and see whether you like it, and you can take it over and we can work with it. But I'm obviously joking, half joking, but the purpose, the point is that without basic types of data, it's impossible to proceed, and it doesn't need to be human rights related. Thank you.
Dr. Ziad?
Just a quick answer. I think, yeah, judicial cases are the main data, and there is a program launched in the African Union with UNDP about acceleration of domestication and ratification of a human rights treaty. This is a good program who was launched by, because there is also this ignorance about the existence of such convention and system inside the states, even by the judges or the lawyers or the I would say legal actors. This is my last remark.
I just wanted to ask, in case you haven't seen it, to go and visit the Mansurat Kanuniyya, project that we have here at AUC, which is precisely a collection of this type of judgments, which, if that was generalized, it would be amazing, an amazing resource, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks.
I mean, so I would indeed have plenty more. So, for example, I'm also curious about, have there been discussions to move the court from Bahrain, etc. But because of time, we'll leave it there. I'm really glad to have met and made the connection, and I hope you don't mind maybe targeting some of you individually for further questions along the way. But I think it's extremely interesting, but also important. I agree with the fact that now is the wrong time, but Fadi is going to lay the groundwork for us, and at least it'll be one publication to hopefully help in a future discussion. Fadi, if you have nothing more, indeed, I would conclude with a very big thanks towards you, Fadi, for moderating. I had pre-moderated wrongly about the upcoming moderation, so sorry for that. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for staying with us and writing about this. And thank the five of you very much indeed for taking the 1.5 hours. I realize that very usually you have a big audience that you share your insight with, and it might be a little unusual to just have these small 1.5 discussions, but I actually think it's extremely valuable because in these last 20 minutes, this is where the magic happens. And maybe we should have done it 2 hours, but this was really insightful and helpful. And I hope it was also a benefit to you to get to know each other, and to maybe your paths will cross in the future, which I think would be great. I hope ours cross. Thank you also to Valeska, who I know has put a lot of work into this. Thank you, Hussein, as well, who's with us, who's assisting us on media questions. And with that, I hope you have a lovely day. Shukran jazilan, and I hope to see you all again very, very soon. Thank you so much.